Here today 5 panelists in 2 different groups. So here we have Jean Bolger from Johnson & Johnson Development Corporation and Philippe Montaigne from FundPlus, both international investors who have invested in Spain. So Philippe recently, as he just explained, in Minorix, and Jean as an investor in AELIX. We also have here 3 entrepreneurs who have, well, 3 persons representing Spanish companies who have succeeded in raising funds from both national and international investors. And in 2 cases, they have also announced this year their acquisition by big companies. So we have Joan Perelló from Sanifit, Claudia D'Augusta from Tygenix, and Rafael Bru from Stat. So I would let them introduce themselves and give us their perspectives or their views of the Spanish sector, how they see it. But so we can start with Jean.
Hi everybody, yes, so Jean Bolger, I'm with Johnson & Johnson Innovation, JJDC. JJDC is the corporate venture fund of J&J. It has the longest track record of any corporate investment firm in any industry, not just actually in biopharma. J&J started investing off the balance sheet in new technologies and companies back in 1973. So around the time that the venture capital industry was first getting off the ground. So we've that sort of 45-year track record of investing across all 3 sectors of our business, biopharmaceuticals, medical device and consumer, although our history of investing in consumer-directed healthcare products is much more recent. We've only been doing those sort of deals in the last few years, I would say. We're always showing up as a strategic investor. That's really overtly our investment thesis. We're not investing for a financial return. We're really investing because there's something about the science, the technology, the product portfolio that we think if we find a way to enable it successfully with our syndication partners, that could be something of interest to J&J's pipeline. So we really go into deals with very much that mindset that where we actually seek support internally from our R&D organisation and operating companies to enter into those investments. So that's really how we play in the space, if you like. We always syndicate our deals. Because we're not a financial investor, we're not investing out of a discrete pot of money. So we're taking money directly off the balance sheet of J&J. That gives us a lot of flexibility. We can literally put 100,000 euros into a company, or even $100,000, up to many millions, and we do. Most of the portfolio that we really manage as investors is obviously privately backed companies, but we do also facilitate business development strategic transactions with PIPEs, with investments in public companies. So we have a very broad portfolio for that reason, because it's not financially driven and we're not, if you like, marketing or selling that portfolio. We're working with others on those assets to advance them towards the market. You won't see much on our website about the size of the fund or, you know, the number of deals we have, etc. But I can give you sort of a general sense that at any point in time we would have about $1.2 billion in book value of assets under management. And typically on an annual basis, we invest $300 to $400 million in new and follow-on investments. And this is from a group of, I think we're 13 investors now. So it's, you know, it's a significant activity, some very chunky deals in there, and lots of very, very small deals as well. So we have no limitations on ticket size. We're obviously very interested in the technology. We're very interested in the team and advancing entrepreneurship. And at the end of the day, the investment activity is just one component of what we do in Johnson & Johnson Innovation more broadly, which is to try to advance innovation, for patients, really, to bring products to patients.
So yeah, I will not repeat, well, many of you were attending my presentations. I'll not repeat too much about FundPlus and what we do and where I'm coming from. So maybe, but for those who were not there, it's a Belgian fund. The size is about 200 million euros, which makes us in a very good position amongst the European investors. And since yesterday night, I'm one of the investors in Spain. So I got a lot of pressure from BioSpain because I was invited to take part of this panel before we closed the deal. So I had to close it. to justify my place here, I suppose, this afternoon, which I did. But more seriously, yeah, well, we'll come back to that maybe in the discussion a bit later. I can come back to what attracts us, particularly in Minorix, as an example of a Spanish company in which we invested. But basically what I can maybe tell you also, which I didn't mention in my previous presentation, is what is it for the shareholders of FundPlus? And I think that's an interesting angle. So I told you there are 30% of public investors from the federal government in Belgium and the regions. And then 70% are private individuals, mainly family offices, very wealthy people in general, and basically they are dear to our project, which is to also invest when it's needed. We can be there for the long term. As I said, we are an evergreen fund, and so these guys know that their money is invested there potentially for the long term. And so one question that I'm used to have, and certainly I can tell you about that, it's what is it there for them? Well, first they want to contribute also to some societal impact, and whether it's also basically make sure we can defend the position of Belgium and Belgian academic environment if it's possible. But financially, as we are not a closed fund, we don't close after 7 or 10 years. What we do is that when there is an exit, and I mentioned the exit on Ojeda, which made us double the size of the fund. Actually, when we make an exit, we offer them, each of the shareholders, to take his benefit in cash, in pro rata of their shares in the fund. And what you can see with Ojeda, that made us grow from 125 to 200 million euros, which shows that most of them didn't take their benefit. Most of them let the money in the fund, which is a good sign because they definitely trust. Also, they trust us, but also it shows that they really adhere to a longer-term project. So that's something that I could clarify. Maybe I can come back later on Minorix, or you want? And maybe it's better to. Okay. Yeah, you want to tell me now? So basically, yeah. So for those who were not in the room, just during my presentation before, we announced this morning a major investment in Minorix, a company based in Barcelona. At FundPlus, we led that investment. It's a 21 million euros Series B round. So it seems to be, I think it is the largest biotech investment this year in Spain. And if you look at basically what attracts us here is certainly the quality of the science. So it's a relatively well-advanced project, phase 2, phase 3 already for one indication in rare neurological diseases. The medical need is there, very high. The project has shown some form of proof of concept. In that case, they even went already to a phase 1. So as I said, they're already in phase 2, phase 3 with one indication. So they have already shown both in vivo animal studies and with first human experience that, so it's already de-risking to some extent the project. In that case, it's a small molecule. It is not necessarily the most revolutionary approach. It's not like gene or cell therapy as we do for other companies, but with other companies. But it definitely corresponds to a very high medical need where we can make the difference. Certainly, bringing that sort of project to the market. And we like the team, we like the CEO, and not only the CEO, but the rest of the team as well. There are very good strengths in that team, so that's very important to us. And on top of that, we believe we can help, and we can contribute and bring our own expertise. Well, myself, I'm a neurologist by background. I've been head of R&D for rare diseases at GSK, so definitely I'm a bit biased. But I also believe that we can bring the needed network to help them and contribute. And relationship between Belgium and Spain in that case should work. We have another person who can testify about that. Claudia can tell you a lot coming from Spain about the relationship with the environment in Belgium. So I think we can certainly bring some good entrepreneurial spirit as well. So it's all that makes it attractive to us, and where we succeeded also to embark co-investors, including public Belgian co-investors, as you may have seen for those who have seen the press release or the media. So it is also with public investors in Belgium who were convinced by FundPlus to follow us in in this journey. So this is, and we can come back later on more specific things, but these are the main reasons why we were attracted by the company.
In the spirit of celebrating success, could I suggest a round of applause for Menerix on that great news?
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, congratulations. So, well, thanks for inviting us to be part of this panel. And I must say that I feel a bit privileged for sharing this panel with this group of investors and with the real success stories and being classified as such, because we are just underway. These guys have already succeeded, completed all the way with products approved, products in the market, and executed a trade sale. So congratulations. Wanted to start saying that. So, I mean, I know many of the faces here, so we know each other. We are Sunnyfeed. We are the anti-calcification company. We are an academic spin-off and are working with calcium-related disorders. Basically, what we are doing is managing calcium in the body. We want calcium to go where it should go, which is building the bones and building the teeth, and preventing calcium from going where it should not go, which is going to the soft tissues, be it a kidney forming a kidney stone, be it an artery forming a cardiovascular calcification, or even in the teeth forming dental tartar. So our technology is around that. It's around managing this movement of calcium in the body. And from the scientific point of view, I would not classify that as a new concept, because inhibiting calcification, which is what we are doing, is an approach, is a concept that in the field of chemistry, and I'm a chemist by training, was developed and discovered more than 60 years ago. But nobody had applied this knowledge, this concept, to the field of medicine. And there are a number of pathologies which remain as unmet medical needs, and I'll tell you just a few words about that. Precisely because the classical approaches to these pathologies failed at some point during past development efforts. So at the moment, the company is working with a leading asset, which is called SNF472. We are developing this product for 2 cardiovascular complications. One of them is a rare disease. We have the molecule basically phase 3 ready for that endeavor. And calciphylaxis is a devastating disease. It's a condition that kills 55% of the patients the first year. There is nothing in the market for such an indication, and basically all the care at the moment is palliative care. So we have reasons to believe that there is something valuable with SNF472 for these patients. And on top of that, this is a rare disease with all the implications that you guys know that means. And then with the same approach, with the same molecule, with the same ingredient, we are addressing a much larger patient population, which is the renal insufficiency population. These patients suffer from cardiovascular disease, and funny enough, this is not what all of you would have in your minds. When one says cardiovascular disease, we all think about hypertension, cholesterol management, MI, stroke, these kind of things. This is not what kills the dialysis patient, the patient with renal insufficiency. These patients basically have a dramatic problem of arterial calcification. They have their arteries calcifying, and same as all of us calcify over our life because we get older. These people have this problem in an accelerated fashion. So in 1 year, they get the levels of calcification we get in a lifetime. So there is nothing to manage this problem. There were some past attempts by big pharma, Amgen, and some companies did some indirect approaches to that, which put a lot of light in the basic knowledge of the condition. But basically the problem there is that when we have arteries calcifying, our vessels become less compliant, and these patients end up having heart failure, heart insufficiency, which leads them to cardiovascular death. 20% mortality in 1 year. So this is what we are doing with our approach. Started, as I said before, as an academic, as a spin-off, and now the asset is phase 3 ready. During the way, well, we went through the different, and some colleagues here did the same, the different stages of the ecosystem, biotech ecosystem in Spain. To say something, because when we started back in 2004, there was not even an ecosystem. Now we have an ecosystem which all of you are building, but by then there was no ecosystem. So we put our piece of our little contribution there. So I think it was 4 years ago we managed to start clinical trials with some clinical data. And thanks to the support of our largest shareholder, who's La Caixa, who has been supporting the company now for 12 years. That's longest stint for for a VC. So we had Isios back in 2015 leading an international round in Sanifit. And we were able to attract, I think it's 5 international VCs by then, all of them first-time investors in Spain. So you can ask them about the pain associated to that, and maybe you also can explain some of these, because we understand that there are certain legal aspects in Spain that are a bit more complex than in other countries, to say it in a soft way. And probably it's cheaper to hire good attorneys than changing, the mindset of the policymakers. So we did the first thing, which is hiring good lawyers. But at the end, I mean, we managed to do that. Now some of these funds are even doing their second investments in other companies in Spain, which is great, because once you have gone through the pain once, there are certain things which are already done, and it's easier to repeat. So and maybe we will discuss later, but I'm just anticipating things. We have always had in the back of our mind whether, I mean, the company is based in the Balearic Islands, in Mallorca. So we have always had the discussion around, is that the right location? Why Mallorca? Well, because I was born there. Okay, that's the reason. So is that the right location? I don't know, but that's the location. I was born there, so I spun out the business from the university there. So we had some discussions a few years ago about that. We're thinking about other potential locations. At the end, thinking long term and the strategy of establishing a footprint in the US. 2 years ago, we opened an office in the United States. So basically now we have half of the team in Mallorca. Yes, in Mallorca, half of the team, and research, IP, manufacturing, all this is handled from Mallorca, and then clinical, regulatory, even our CFO is based in the United States. And that has one component, which is, of course, location and having access to the right talent. This is one component, but there is one other component, which is the long-term strategy of the company in order to go to the next stages in terms of development and funding those developments. So I will pause here and can give some space for future discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so one thing is that obviously enthusiasm is what entrepreneurs need to have. I think that we have a very good example here. I guess that as for my background, I had the pleasure to work with some of you already back in mid-2000. My background is finance. I've always been in the dark side of the biotech world, and trying indeed to, kind of turn all the stones. I started in 2004 with a company called Celerix, and then became Tygenix, and then, a NASDAQ IPO, finally a licensing to Takeda, and then finally an acquisition of Takeda, and we're finally launching our product for a very debilitating disease in Crohn patients. So that is, in a nutshell, my background.
Sorry. Claudia, can you explain a little bit what led you to the merger of Tygenix and Celerix. So I think that's an important part of your story.
Okay. Well, I think that is give us 2 hours probably talk, but again, very, very short. I think it was a great structure at that time. What happened? As always, you know, you have a failure in life, and in times of difficulties, you find your strength inside with the resources at hand. One of those was definitely, we still had at that time a part of a Series B that was led by Isios, which obviously after the phase 3 failing, you know, there were questions about what do we do now? Do we keep and retry again a phase 3 because that was a pivotal study? Or do we go for merging or reverse merging with a company that has similarities in terms of challenges? So it had to be, we are in the cell-based therapy space, so something in that space. And luckily we found in Tygenix in Belgium a perfect candidate. So we reverse merged into a public company in Euronext at that time. And 2, we did what is normally done for Euronext, which was a right issue. So we basically embedded part of the Series B and, you know, into a larger right issue in a public market. So we basically brought the pipeline. Tygenix brought the quotation in Euronext, plus the funds and the management. So at that time in 2011, you know, after a lot of strategic review and debate and comments about what next, I think the board, led by Joel and other member of the board, really took the brave decision to keep disbursing the last tranche of the Series B and give a leap of faith to the management to bring, you know, the product in safe harbor. So it was a long way. We had at that point phase 2 data. We restarted with a phase 3. Plus, we had the challenge of launching a product in the market, which for a small biotech company was not easy. And third, we had to face, at least for myself and part of the management team, being public. Suddenly at once, you know, going from a failure to up to be quoted in Euronext. So I think it was really brave from all of the investors. I still believe that patients don't know what happened. We are now launching in Europe. We are receiving letters from patients which are heartbreaking. This is a very orphan drug, debilitating disease. And, you know, you would like to explain to them, thank you very much, and what is behind. I think today we were discussing with our chief medical officer how grateful we are of where we stand. And, you know, for patients, as Jen was saying before, I think it was a successful story, but took us, I don't know, 14 years. But finally we...
Again, you know, in the spirit of celebrating success, I mean, I think this story is a phenomenal milestone for the ecosystem in Spain, and an event that has happened since BioSpain last year, I guess, right? Yeah. The closing of the acquisition by Takeda. I think it's worthy of another loud round of applause.
Oh. Thank you.
And so I actually just have a thought to kind of get the conversation going as well, just in terms of the structuring of that deal. I think the very interesting point there, to me at least, thinking about our portfolio companies, honestly, is to what extent the fact that there was some of the Series B left on the books to allow the pivot into that reverse merger deal structure. Were there ways from a strategic consideration, would it have been possible to do that if the money hadn't been there? You would have had to raise a new round, I suppose, or I don't know. Because typically the way we structure our deals, honestly, is, you know, we spend all the money on the program. That's what we usually do. So when we get to that point of failure, usually there is no money left. Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
No, it's a very fair point. I think it was at that time brilliant. I think it was when I received the term sheet, you know, for the Series B, and there were different tranches, and one of which was upon results of the phase 3. Someone told me this is going to be very plain vanilla terms. Don't worry, Claudia. And I think I spent like 14 days in trying to, in an Excel, trying to understand how that would work and what kind of clauses would trigger the last tranche. So, as always, difficult structures, if there's a rationale, if there is at the end something that really brings value. And we discussed before about, be mindful in terms as an entrepreneur. Sometimes you are scared of dilution or preferential rights or structure that are not, very easy to understand. I think if there is behind the business consideration, and in this case, really the objective was avoid the company to be financially distressed upon a positive, upon a negative result. I think that was, again, brave but brilliant as well, because most of the time in Europe, as a manager, you get, just the bare minimum to get to the milestone, and then come back and ask for more money. It's not the US where, money should not be an issue. So in our case, I think it was, faith, on the technology, on the management, and be, very, as you say, Jen, very upfront on even months before the phase 3 result, what would have been best for the company in the interest of all shareholders. I think we had also Roche and Novartis, which were at that point supportive of not having the pressure to get out of the investment, which I think it was always, again, for the, and I'm just going to pass it, but just for all of us, having a good mix between corporate venture and financial institutions and VC, pure VC, it's a great support for the entrepreneur, because timing of exit may be different. Strategic thinking about what's next for the company could also be complementary. So I think, again, it was a great story. I'm happy that I'm here by miracle, as a matter of fact, to tell this story, because I think it was really life-changing for patient today, but also for the employees, for the company, for the shareholders. So really, and actually I think the title of my contribution was fundraising ahead or after a milestone. And this is what I wanted to bring. Sometimes, it's not plain vanilla terms, but please, at boards as well. This is a recommendation for entrepreneurs, for board members. Think very much ahead of the milestone. What if?
Okay, thank you, Claudia. I will try to summarize the StatDX case. I had a couple of slides. I don't know if we can show them. We'll try to make it in 5 minutes. I could spend hours talking about this, but time is limited. So first of all, thanks to the organizers for inviting us, and congratulations to Philippe for the investment in Minorix. So in a nutshell, what we have developed during the last 7 years is a system for in vitro diagnostics based on an analyzer and a cartridge. And the vision we have here, it was to integrate all the steps that are done in a lab setup that take usually several hours with a lot of complex manual steps into a single cartridge that could be used in an analyzer. So the idea here is very simple. It has to be very simple to use. You pick one cartridge is a test. You load a sample that could be, for instance, directly picked from the patient through a swab or through a sputum or a stool sample, put it into the cartridge, close the cartridge, put the cartridge into the analyzer, press a few buttons, and in about an hour you have the result, and you can see what pathogens were detected and what not. Usually we use PCR, so we are able to detect between 20 and 40 pathogens per test, and with this the doctor or the healthcare provider can have a clear view of what pathogens were present in the sample and what not. And this has a high value because if the pathogen was detected, the healthcare provider can decide what treatment can apply to the patient. But even in the case where the test is negative, it can be ruled out that 20 pathogens are not the cause. So the healthcare provider knows that it has to look at a different place for the cause of that disease. So therefore, we done here was to integrate all these steps in a single cartridge. So one of the magic things is we are not using a fancy or really a new technology. The secret of this cartridge is to integrate everything that is used in a lab in a disposable device that is very simple to use. And then the second is that we provide a performance that is at the same level that what labs are used to have. So we don't have a system that is easy to use, providing a marginal performance. As we use the same techniques that are used today in the lab, the results are perfectly comparable. So for a molecular biologist, looking at the results of the cartridge, he can immediately trust them because he knows that he would have obtained exactly the same if the same sample had been run in a lab. And the third, we also did a big effort to contain the cost of the cartridge because today this can address a premium market segment, but we all know that in the future prices go down, and we want to have a system that that could be sustainable on the long term. Even when there will be in the future some erosion on the margins, we think that this system can still be competitive because the cost of the plastic consumable is very low. So if we can move to the next slide, I will just briefly explain what our track record, thank you, has been. So the company was founded in 2010 by Jordi Carrera and myself. And we started with money, and we really got the first investment in 2011, thanks from the guys from Misius. Some of them are today in the room. And at that point, I have to say that the only thing we had in our hands was an idea and a vision, but we had at that moment nothing tangible to demonstrate that this system could be a reality. So I think that at that moment there was a brave decision to trust us and to enable to have some money in order to demonstrate that this system could be viable. So I think for here we have to be very thankful to them. So we spent the 2 first years of the company in order to achieve what we call a proof of principle. So we work mainly with local suppliers in order to demonstrate that our claims could be made if sufficient money was invested in the company. So we made a series of proof of concepts involving plastics, showing that all the technologies, sample processing, nucleic acid purification, and nucleic acid amplification were feasible from a technical perspective. This allowed us, with the help of Misius, to build a strong file and to look for money from international investors that we finally had in 2013. So this was a very important milestone for the development of the company because this money allowed us, we raised 17 million from VCs as Kurma and Idinvest from France, and we also had Caixa on board. And we use this money in order to start the contracts with our manufacturing partners in order to start building what was the instrument, the analyzer, and also to start building all the technologies required for the cartridge. And just to show that this is not only about money, at this point we also had the appointment as chairman, a person that has been very important for the development of the company, that is Gerard Vaillant, that was a former CEO of G&G Diagnostics and who joined the company as director of the board. And he's a person whose advice has been extremely helpful during all the development of the company. He has helped us in order to fine-tune the message, in order to address, to better define our target market. He's a person who had also a strong links to many people in the industry. So it also allow us to get a better knowledge and to be introduced to a lot of people. And I think that this also shows that it's not only about money, it's also about creating a team and creating a group of people that really can support the company in its growth process. So between 2013 and 2016, we spent the time developing cartridge analyzer. At the beginning was difficult because we all know that the first tries never work. So we spent a lot of time redefining the system and correcting the issues. And there was a moment when everything started to work. And this is a sort of magical moment when you see that all the pieces that you have put together start to work and you start to generate really data that supports that the product can sustain the claims that you have done at the beginning. With this in hand, when we had a demonstration that the technology was viable, we reached this point where we call technology validation. At this point, we looked for additional money in order to build mainly the manufacturing capabilities that would prepare the company to reach the market. So at that point, we invested mainly in manufacturing capabilities for the instrument in Germany, for the cartridge, and also we invested in an assembly line in Barcelona that was used for the final assembly of the cartridges. This was in 2016, so we had Gilde Healthcare on board, as well as a corporate VC that was Siemens. Yeah, I forgot to mention also that in 2013 we also had Boehringer Ingelheim on board, so we had an interesting mix of corporate and private VCs. And after the Series C round, so we prepared the company to be ready to commercialize the product, building the manufacturing capabilities. We reached the C marking at the end of last year, end of 2017. We performed the C marking for our first product that was a respiratory panel, able to detect 24 pathogens found in the respiratory tract infections. And at the point when the company was ready to put the product into the market, we have been in April of this year acquired by Qiagen, that is building a very interesting portfolio in this space, in molecular diagnostics, and who has already started to introduce the product in the market. So we have started with the respiratory panel, and in the next weeks, a gastrointestinal panel will be available, and there is a pipeline of products to complement the platform that will come in the next years. So that's in a nutshell what our case is, and well, thanks for your attention. I try to keep it short, but I don't know
Thank
if I
you
succeed.
very much. No, it was short, and I think that, again, we have to congratulate you, and I think that another round of applause is merited. Okay, so, well, first of all, I'll let Jean explain us a little bit the story of JJDC and ILX. And as Philippe did with Minorix, what did you see in ILX and in a Spanish company?
Absolutely, and so as a company, we invested in the first round in the Series A with Isios and Lacaisha, really because it satisfied our need to identify areas of high unmet need. This is HIV therapeutic vaccine. On the face of it, the clinical needs day to day of patients living with HIV seem like they are largely met, but if you actually talk to patients, they really would love to get rid of the virus. And so J&J has a long history of working in the HIV space and infectious diseases and viral diseases more generally, and we see this as an area where we can really make a difference. And so the technology that was being presented by the founder, Christian Brander, was a very compelling story, because really the scientific idea here is that there is a certain very small percentage of people, when they're exposed to the HIV virus, in the absence of any treatment to reduce the viral load, they manage with their own immune system to control the replication of the virus. And it's recognizing, we really like opportunities in this area of science that capture insights from real life clinical practice. You've heard of the concept of, bench to bedside. This is kind of bedside back to bench. So it's really recognizing that there's something about the immune system and how it responds to the HIV virus in those particular individuals, that if that could be made available more broadly as a means of stimulating the immune system of other people who need lots of therapy for the rest of their lives, could that actually reduce or even eliminate the virus? And so that's really the thesis. It's a peptide antigen that is delivered in vectors as a vaccine for patients that already have HIV. So it's very exciting scientifically and clinically, and we're well on the journey now. We've made enormous progress since making the investment. I think we closed the investment in 2015, late 2015, the very end of the year, I think. So it's been a very short time frame, and we've gone from that thesis into clinical studies. So yes, it's great team. We're building and still building a really great team. New people joining us on a regular basis now, and so yeah, very exciting journey. But maybe the more important thing for the broader ecosystem is, how did we get into that deal? Because truth be told, corporate investors or financial investors, there are a few of us in each team. I said, the size of our portfolio, it's a global portfolio with, 12 investors. And there's only so much we can do. And the way these companies are supported by life science investors is it's a very tight relationship. It requires a lot of enablement. It requires you to spend a lot of time with the company. And you simply can't do that if you're spread across a very large geography. So the truth is, it's difficult for us actually to get outside a sort of a core, even within Europe, where we already did not have a huge presence in the biopharm investing space before I joined the team. But it's difficult, we're now 2 investors on the biopharm side in Europe, just to kind of cover all of Europe. And to the earlier presentation, your presentation, Philippe, there's a lot of very interesting science and technology, and there's a need to translate that. So what happens really is this whole environment is one big relationship. That's really what happens. And so is ICEOS presenting this opportunity, this investment opportunity to us that brought us into the deal? I'm pretty certain that we wouldn't have spotted it or thought of investing in Spain without the support of a local VC who really has the finger on the pulse of the ecosystem. So that's incredibly important to us.
Maybe I can add to that, because something I didn't mention amongst the very important criteria for us to invest is the quality of the syndicate. The present or the present investors and the new investors coming, I think it's very important that we have very good and strong international, when possible, international syndicates. And I think I definitely join Jean on what you say in terms of networking. It's a question of people, and it's human. So I think we should encourage all the CEOs to be part of networks. You have local VCs, they are here in the room, like ICEOS, like Aisha, who do a fantastic job to connect to international investors and to corporate funds. So be aware of that and leverage that. And I think it's all about networking and make sure that you have the right connections, that you can be coached by those who succeeded. You have good examples here. So I think that's really the message to pass to the CEOs, is to make sure that be as much connected as you can be, at least at the European level. Then, of course, you have the US is coming and other continents, but definitely already at the European level, it's very critical to be part of a very active network.
So, okay, so we know what's good in Spain, or what's being done good, well, but how do you see Spain different? Because you were showing some statistics that we are ranked 5th in terms of science, but 8th in terms of investment. So what is not being done properly here in Spain, or how do you see Spain different from other countries in which you invest? And yes, nobody's listening, you can be frank.
Yeah, well, I think first thing to say, I think it's cultural. And I know that very well from France. I know much better France than Spain, but basically I think it's very similar culture. So this, as we said, the science is excellent, and we have difficulties to translate. And the culture starts at the level of school, at the level of education, at the level of course, the business school. So it's really when you are still training the young people that you need to educate them on being entrepreneurs. And that, I think, is something that is very well done in the US. You have kids of 16, 18 years old who are already creating their own micro companies in the US. It's something which is very common. We don't do that, and we don't do that enough, and we don't necessarily have that entrepreneurship. So it's really cultural. Then comes all the administrative and legal barriers. So I'm not yet an expert of the Spanish bureaucracy, but I had some views on that, investing and closing the investment yesterday in Minoric. So for sure, that doesn't help. It's also very similar to France, by the way, so which is not a good example on that either. Because in France, you know, they have a famous dessert which is called millefeuille. Millefeuille is 1,000 of layers, and the administration is also a millefeuille in France. You also have 1,000 of layers. And unfortunately, what I see in Spain, you are not the best ones either on that. So definitely all these things need to be managed. And as we said, it's having good lawyers, having good advisors can help. But the main thing is cultural. It starts with the culture, and it starts at a very young age, I think.
I mean, and I will pass the microphone along, or the speaker along. A few other thoughts. Be mindful that, you know, we have this perception in Europe, so it's not just in Spain, but in Europe, that we're not able to attract the sort of capital that the US can attract into life sciences. Be mindful that within the US, every state other than Massachusetts and California has exactly the same complaint, that they don't get to see the money, right? So I think some of the examples we've heard here are really great in terms of how to foster and incubate and enable an early stage ecosystem, because look, it is early. You know, I think you spoke to that one, right? You know, it's like, it's a young ecosystem. And so being able to collaborate and do deals with companies that are co-located in two different parts of Europe is actually really great for the ecosystem, I think. And I feel, sort of from a J&J point of view, don't tell this to my bosses, but my job is to attract some of J&J's money into Europe generally, and to find good science technology, which frankly we can access much more cost efficiently than in the US right now. So there's lots of opportunity, but I think everybody's got to be a little bit less parochial about how they view that opportunity. Don't be if you know what you need in the ecosystem is a very strong VC fund locally. Don't stop them from investing outside of Spain. That's really important, because they will bring other money and other investors. You know, it starts with their non-executive directors, and then they become their investors. You know, it's a very small family, and you've got to be very non-parochial about it, I think.
Yeah, I would like to echo some of the things that you said, and making reference back again to the ecosystem. And I would like to respectfully disagree as well. I don't think it's a cultural thing, because, you know, if I look around, I don't see a difference between Rafael, Mark at Minoritz, you know, Fernando who's around, or myself with other entrepreneurs in other countries. I think it's more about the ecosystem, and if we are 5th in science and 8th in investments, we will get there. I mean, just some figures that I was collecting when preparing for this presentation. So we have Caixa with 27 portfolio companies in life sciences. We have Inverready with 27 more. We have Isios with close to 20. We have Crossroads Biotech with 24, sorry. You have to update your website. Health Equity, SIDS. And, you know, when we started, Caixa didn't have a life sciences arm. We were the first or the second investment in life sciences. Isios didn't exist. Meredi was not doing investments. Crossroads didn't exist. Alta, Asabis, and all the list, Health Equity, all these investors who are now investing in Spain and telling these people, come to Spain, we have good companies. These people were not here. So this is part of the ecosystem. So is the science today better than 15 years ago when we were starting the companies? You know, probably not. But now there are other elements which are helping. But this has been a decade. It's all very, very new. And then, yes, the bureaucracy doesn't help, but it doesn't prevent investors from coming to Spain. It's one more barrier, but it can be overcome. But that said, you know, I think, you know, there were times where the public funding was 60% of our budget. SIDS 0. And you say, wow, how much money you raised from public sources? No, how little money we raised from private sources. It's a different perspective, because there were no private sources. So don't get me wrong, I think that the innovation has to come from the private sector, but at the same time, I do believe that the politicians and the public, the administration, has to be the catalyst as well. And I'm not saying that they have to be the drivers, but they have to be there to support this kind of innovation, because otherwise some opportunities will be lost. And of course there will be always Rafaels and Claudias in the world, but this cannot be the exception. This should turn into the rule.
No, I agree with that. I think that having an ecosystem is key, because already building a company is a big effort, and you want to have the things available, so that is the least burden. So having capital funds close, it's really key to to be able to sustain the company. And if you have, I mean, there are a lot of barriers. The less you have, the easier it is to make it happen.
And yeah, one more thing, and now, people like them are part of the ecosystem, because when we started the company, I was trying to look around of, other peers. So you had 2 or 3 companies, including Stellarids, who were around by then. So now the new entrepreneurs have, how many clinical stage companies there are now in Spain? There are quite a few. So you can look around and talk to other CEOs, talk to other entrepreneurs, and have, and at least bar conversations of lessons learned, which unfortunately I did not have.
Okay, well, I would love to stay here with you, but the startups will be presenting soon, and they've allowed us 5 more minutes before they start presenting and become success stories, as you have succeeded. But we have so then 5 minutes for the audience, if you have any questions. Otherwise, I have. Okay.
Thanks. My question is more for the company people. We've been discussing about what the companies should have to attract the international investors, but I want to hear you, or I want you to share with the audience how different is to have these guys on your boards, on your shareholder base. What is what they bring to your companies, and in the positive and in not so positive way. I mean, explain everything, because it's complex to have them on board, but at the same time, it's a keystone for making the difference in your companies.
So perhaps I can comment. I think in our case, one of the things that this is brought to the company is a lot of contacts within this tool that they had already available. So this allows us really to have access to much more people, to be able to bring new ideas in, to discuss some when defining the product, to make a better definition, and also to have partners that could help us in the development. For instance, in our particular case, one of the guys that has finally done the cartridge for us was a person that was introduced by issues during the due diligence process of the first investment. So this really shows that having the right expert is something that is key for the kind of companies that we are. And then, of course, you have the vision, a fresh vision of the sector. So when looking for money, also having the local investors in help to create a credible syndicate. And I think that this is in Europe or even outside, they trust you as a local VC that you know very well the space in Spain, and they can rely on this to trust finally the company. I don't know if...
Well, on my side, I think it can go from the very logistical things of having everything in English. So get ready, because obviously you're attracting investors that you need to culturally mingle with, which means that you have to talk their language and communicate, and they also have their own bosses and agenda. So you need to kind of understand. I think the role of the chairman is absolutely key, and that role is also bringing pace in the discussion. So, of course, as I said before, investors that comes in different round has different rights, different liquidation, different time on their ventures, different funds available to follow on, in the investment. And I think, obviously, it becomes, like Saturday night, and all the friends that want to go in a restaurant or another. So there's a big deal about what's next and how do we put ourselves together. And suddenly, is the chairman that says, "Okay, guys, so this is where we need to go, and let's have the management work. Let's come back with some terms, and let's discuss with the management." So I think it becomes much more objectives in a way, and less an erratic random walk. But it's indeed complex. So let's say I would indulge in more words to thank the work that our chairman in the past has done for us, and latest Jean-Stéphane, a very wise and well-known in Belgium entrepreneur, ex-chairman of GSK. You know, when you see him coming, I remember the first time I asked him, why you're joining us? I mean, we are a pain really for you. You know, every week there's a call or there's a budget deviation. And he said, you know, I just want to be sure that before I finally retire, I'm able to see another launch in the market of something that is really disruptive for patients. So you need to have someone in the board that really is driving and with passion. I think that is perhaps my little grain of experience.
Yes, so we have a board with 9 people, 2 observers, and then the management attending the board meeting. So when we have board meetings, we are a party of 17, 18 people. So just to frame the discussion. So we have VCs, we have corporates, we have a couple of independents. On the VC side, we have people who are former CEOs, we have people with more finance background, people with more clinical development background. So on the positives, all this expertise, which is complementary, I think this is something really great to have it available for the company. And we don't have to think that we know everything, and because that's not the case. Of course, everyone has to have a role, whose management and whose board, and where the limits of giving opinion on or having a board discussion and the decision, and then actually implementing the action at the company level. The challenging part is when you have so many people, the number of opinions increases exponentially with the number of people. So if you have 17 people, probably you have more than 30 opinions in the room. And this is when the interest of the company has to prevail above, as you were commenting, the different agendas. Of course, everyone has different agendas. It's not possible that J&J has the same agenda as Fund Plus. They are different entities. They have different probably bylaws and reasons for missions. So that's understandable, but there is a company that has a mission which is developing, life-transforming therapy or a device for whatever, and this is the direction that a board, addressing your question, has to follow. And I believe, and that's just personal experience, that probably different people behave differently. The same person, behaves differently in different boards because, every board has its own dynamics. And it also takes some time when you have, in our case, such a large group of people to, have this common understanding.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we need to stop now. Thank you very much for your contributions. And welcome to